In this lesson, we are going to add the functionality to add new to-dos using the Ionic application. So we'll start by creating a new page in our application that will allow the users to add new to-do items, and then we'll save those to-dos on Cloud File Store in a new collection called ToDos. So here we are back inside Visual Studio Code, and the first thing I'll do is create a floating action button inside our todos.page.html file. This floating action button will allow the user to navigate to a new page that we'll create next. That page will allow the users to add new to-dos to their list of to-dos. So I'll start by using the IonFab component. I'll set the horizontal property to end and the vertical property to bottom, and this will give me a floating action button on the bottom right corner. Along with that, I'll also define the slot value as fixed, which will prevent the floating action button from scrolling along with the page. Inside this IonFab component, I'll define an IonFab button, which will be the actual button. In here, I'll use an Ion icon, and I'll use add for the name of the icon. This gives me a blue floating action button on the bottom right corner, but since I want it to match with the rest of the application, I'll also give it a color of danger. Now that we have a floating action button of red color on the bottom right corner, let's bind the click event of this button to a function. Let's call this function as goToAddToDo, and this function is what we'll create next in our todo.page.ts file. This function will allow the users to navigate to the Add To Do page. We'll create that page in just a few moments. For now, we'll import the nav controller, and then we'll use the nav controller to navigate the user to the Add To Do page. So I'll use this .navController.navigateForward function, and to that I'll pass in /add-todo as the path for the new page. So now that we are ready, let's go ahead and create that new page called Add To Do page. So I'll stop the server and I'll use the Ionic CLI to create that new page. So I'll just go ahead and type in Ionic generate page add to do. This will create the new Add To Do page in our application and will also update the app-routing.module.ts file. Now we'll run the Ionic serve command again. And if you go to your app-routing.module.ts file, you can see that the path is add-todo, which is what we have defined in the navigate forward function inside our todo.page.ts file. I'll change this slash to the /. So now that the new page is created, we need to write some code in the new page. So I'll open add-todo.page.html file. I'll start by changing the title of the page to add new to do, and I'll also change the color of the toolbar to danger. Next, I'll create a form. So I'll use an ion list. Inside that, I'll create an ion item, and inside the ion item, I'll have an ion label with the position of stacked and an ion input, and this input will allow the user to enter the title for their to-do item. I'll copy that, and for this input field, I'll change the label to to-do description, and you can see that we have a good looking form in our application. Here the user can enter the to-do title and the to-do description. We'll have one more field for a new to-do, which is the last date for this to-do item. So I'll copy the ion item again, and I'll remove this ion input. I'll change the ion label to to-do last date, and here we'll use a new component called ion date time, which will allow the user to pick a date using a very nice interface. I'll also specify a display format, and the display format for the date will be month/date/year. And there you can see that I have a nice looking date picker in our application. As of now, the user can choose any date, but since we want the date to be no less than of the current year, I'll define a minimum value for the date. Here I'll just specify 2019, which is the current year, so that the user will not be able to select any date from the previous years. Let's save that, and now you can see that 2019 is the only option that they can select. Finally, I'll create a button which will be a block button, and the button will have rounded corners. I'll define the color danger for this button, and the text on the button will be add to do. This button will be used to add the new to do to our Cloud Firestore collection. Last but not the least, I'll add an back button to our toolbar that will allow the user to navigate back in case they change their mind and do not want to create the new to do. Let's save everything, and now you can see that we have the form ready. So now that the form is ready, let's add bindings. So I'll start by the first input field. I'll use an ng model and I'll set its value equal to todo_title. Similarly, for description, we'll have todo_description, and finally for the date, we'll have the ng model value set to todo_last_date. Finally, we'll bind the click event of the button to a function called add to do. So now that we are done with the HTML file, let's move on to add-todo.page.ts file. Here, we'll start by defining the new function, the add to do function, and before we write the code inside this function, we need to define all the properties that we have defined in our HTML file. And before we proceed, we also need to import Firebase. And we'll also need a field to add the ID of the owner who has created this to-do. So we'll also add a to-do owner field. Inside the constructor, we'll get the value of the currently logged in user's UID and assign it to the to-do owner property. So I'll just go ahead and type in firebase.auth.current_user.uid and we'll set it equal to this.to-do owner. This will assign the currently logged in user's UID to the to-do owner property. Now we are ready to write the code inside the add to do function. So inside the add to do function, we'll use the Firestore SDK. So I'll just go ahead and type in firebase.firestore.collection. The name of the collection will be ToDos, and I'll use the add method to add a new document to the ToDos collection. The ToDos collection does not exist as of now, but once we try to add a document, the collection will be created automatically. Inside this document, we'll add the values for title, which will come from the to-do title property. We'll add the value for description, which will come from to-do description property. We'll add a field called last date and we'll set it equal to this.todo_last_date. And just like that, we'll add a property called owner to which we'll pass in the currently logged in user's UID. We'll add one more field called created, which will contain the actual time of creation of this document. So we'll use a built-in function of Firestore for that, which can be accessed using firebase.firestore.fieldValue.serverTimestamp. And this saves the actual time in the document when this request will be made to Cloud Firestore. Finally, since the add function returns a promise, we can execute the then and the catch functions. The then function in the callback receives a document reference, and for now, we do not need to use this document reference. All we want is display a toast notification to the user and navigate the user back to the previous page. So we'll need the nav controller and the toast controller. So I'll import both of them. But before we do that, let's go ahead and write the catch block. In the catch block, we'll only be displaying a toast notification with the error message to the user. So now that the then and the catch blocks are ready, let's import the toast controller and the nav controller, inject them into the page class. And now inside the then block, we'll display the toast notification first to the user. The message on the toast will be to-do has been added. This will be displayed to the user for 2 seconds. And then finally, we'll present it to the user using the present function. Once the toast has been presented to the user, we'll use the nav controller to navigate the user back to the previous page. In the catch block, all we need is to display the toast notification to the user. So I'll copy the code from there, paste it inside the catch block, and I'll just remove the line that navigates the user back to the previous page. I'll also change the message for the toast to error.message, which will give us the actual error message. Let's save everything and test this out. So I'll click on the floating action button and I'm navigated to the add new to do page where I'll fill out all these fields. I'll select a date and then I'll click on the add to do button. I'll get the toast notification and I'm navigated back to the previous page as well. So everything looks good. Let's head back to our Firebase console and see if the document is actually created in the collection or not. And here you can see that a new collection called ToDos has been created, which contains just one document, and that document contains all the data that we just stored about the to-do. However, we have a problem here. The last date property is not actually a date. It is stored as a string. So we need to fix that. We need to store the last date just in the same format as we have the created property, which is a timestamp. And to fix that, we need to go back to Visual Studio Code. And here I'll wrap this .todo underscore last underscore date property inside the new date function. This will return a date object which is acceptable by the Firebase SDK. Now let's try to create a new to-do again and see if everything works fine. Let's head back to Firebase console, and here we have the second document, and this time the last date property contains a timestamp value instead of a string, which is perfect. So now that the documents are created perfectly, we can go ahead and delete this first document because it can create inconsistency in our application. So now that the users are able to add new to-dos using the add to-do page, in the next video we'll write the code to display all the users' to-dos on the to-dos page.